debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. The affirmative team seated on my right is from Pembroke, and the negatives team seated to my left is from St. Aloysius College. The speaking time for this debate is 4 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Jerry Son.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, timekeeper, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from fuel excise tax. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement is true. We define electric cars as vehicles that run partly or completely on electric power. We define exempt as free from an obligation, and we also define fuel excise tax as tax charged for purchasing fuel. So we define the topic as vehicles that run partly or fully on electrical power should not be free from obligation to pay the tax on purchasing fuel. Today, as first speaker, I'll be talking to you about how it's unjust for both the whole community and the car companies for electric cars to be exempt from fuel excise tax. Our second speaker will be talking about how fuel excise tax is a good tax and how it benefits the national interest. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. I'm going to discuss 2 points. My first point is that it's unfair and unjust for electric car owners to benefit from roads that they don't pay for. It's a common fact that electric cars are expensive. According to carsguide.com, Tesla prices range from $105,000 to $220,000. This is more than a third of the average Adelaide housing price. In a comparison to the $43,960, the average Australian income, according to Australian Bureau of Statistics. Most people can't afford electric cars with their savings. The people who own an electric car are generally people who are wealthy enough to pay for the roads they use. Instead of lessening the burden for the less wealthy, or even making it fair for everyone, our government is doing quite the opposite, making the average citizens pay for the benefits of owning an electric car. This is like getting on a bus and not buying a ticket, while making others pay for your rights. Is that really just? Especially when our whole society is built on equity and fairness? Therefore, electric cars should not pay fuel excise tax so that other motorists aren't paying for their free ride. My second point is that the exemption of electric cars from the fuel excise tax leads to inefficiency in the car industry. Exempting electric cars from the fuel excise tax means that they will be less costly to upkeep, not because the manufacturers are actively trying to make them cheaper and more efficient, but because the government is giving them a leg up. It means that one sector of the industry, the electric car industry, receives preferential treatment, as they will have an advantage given by the government. Just like the government picking winners, this is going to make companies become less efficient, which makes people lose their jobs. If the government picks winners, the markets are not rewarding efficient manufacturers, then the industry will become less efficient and people lose their jobs. We can see this happening already, as according to Productivity Commission, employment in the automotive manufacturing decreased by about 40%, about 30,000 jobs over the period of 2006 to 2013. And I don't need to remind you that a lot of these unemployed Australians should not be paying the fuel excise tax just so some wealthy Australian can drive around in electric vehicles. Ludwig von Mises said that every government intervention in the marketplace causes unintended consequences. In this case, those consequences are a dying car industry. Therefore, to save our car industry, electric cars should not be exempted from fuel excise tax. In conclusion, not only does exempting electric cars from the fuel excise tax create an unfair society as the poor have to pay for the rich, it always It also creates unfair marketing community by making the electric cars seem like a go-to option, making our car industry inefficient. Thank you.
I call upon the first native speaker, Linnell Shaw.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from fuel excise tax. We agree partly with the opposition's definition, but would like to add that we define fuel by the Oxford Dictionary definition as a noun, a substance such as coal, oil, or petrol that is burned to provide power and is only used by gasoline-powered and hybrid vehicles. Therefore, we define the topic as electric vehicles which run completely on electricity, not fuel, in Australia should not be exempt from fuel excise tax. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that that jobs in the car manufacturing industry will be lost. This is wrong because there will be new jobs which will arise in the renewable energy. We are living in the new world where renewable energy is our future, and more jobs will be able to accommodate that. The first affirmative speaker has also tried to tell you that electric cars are too expensive for most people. This is wrong because according to the Sydney Morning Herald, the new generation Tesla, for example, will sell for less than half the cost of existing models, and the convergence in price is on the way. Bloomberg Energy Finance estimates that electric and conventional vehicles will be of similar price by 2025. Electric vehicles are evolving to becoming a price which is affordable to everyone, an incentive getting more people to switch to electric. However, we the negative team strongly believe that this statement is false. Today as first speaker, I will be talking to you about how electric cars do not use fuel, so they therefore cannot pay fuel excise tax, and alternative methods for the tax. Our second speaker, Marlon, will be talking about how exempting electric cars of fuel excise tax will improve our own economy and lead to a boom on renewable energy. Our third speaker, Mia, will rebut and sum up our team case. Now to my arguments. Today, I will be discussing 2 points. My first point is focused purely on the topic sentence itself. According to the Australian Taxation Office, fuels include petroleum fuels such as petrol and diesel, gaseous fuels, crude oil, and lubricants. As I have previously stated in the definition, unlike gasoline-powered and hybrid vehicles, which do run on fuel, electric vehicles do not run on fuel at all. Electric vehicles simply cannot be taxed on fuel because they don't use any. Urban Infrastructure Minister Paul Fletcher supports my argument and told ABC News Breakfast that if you're driving a 10 or 12-year-old Holden Commodore through the fuel excise system, you end up paying about 4.5 cents per kilometre to use our roads. Whereas, if you're driving a brand new Tesla, you're not paying through the fuel excise system at all. Even if electric cars were to have to pay for fuel excise tax, it would be insignificant as they would have nothing to contribute to the tax system, making it completely ineffective. My second point focuses on alternative methods for fuel excise tax. The Electric Vehicle Council predicts that by the end of the next decade, the rate of electric vehicles could increase to making up 60% of all vehicles. The rate of electric cars in Australia is increasing as the amount of money from fuel excise tax is decreasing due to electric vehicles not contributing to the tax fund. According to ABC News, fuel excise has already fallen 30% as a share of GDP between 2001 to 2017. Fortunately, alternative methods have been discovered. Adrian Dwyer, Chief of Infrastructure Partnerships Australia, says that he wanted to see a system where drivers pay based on how many kilometres they drove in a month, calling this the tax on road travel. By paying based on distance instead of fuel, all cars will be able to contribute, including electric cars. According to the Australian Government Productivity Commission, this new method could permanently increase the level of annual GDP of approximately $20 billion. Alternative methods such as this will have a better effect than fuel excise tax altogether. Electric vehicles should be exempt from fuel excise tax and instead be able to contribute to other more effective methods such as a tax on road travel. So Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we the Negative team absolutely do not believe that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. We need to think logically about the situation and realise that making electric cars pay for fuel excise tax is completely pointless. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Kai Speedy.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from fuel excise tax. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe in this statement. The negative team has tried to tell you that electric cars cannot use fuel, proving they should not pay the tax. That's right, these cars cannot. That is not a valid reason for the cars to be exempt from road taxes. The tax was designed to fund our road network and general revenue. The fundamental purpose of the tax has nothing to do with the type of fuel a car uses. It's just a way of collecting the tax. All motorists should contribute to this essential tax. Tax systems need to evolve in line with technology to ensure tax contributions are fair. The negative team has also tried to tell you an alternative tax is needed. This is also wrong. The fuel tax is fundamentally a good tax in that it is collected tax by way of user-pay systems and benefits those that contribute by way of funding those road networks. Rather than scraping a tax, it needs to evolve and keep up with the new vehicle technologies to avoid specific groups being exempt from the tax while others take on the burden. Our first speaker has already explained how unfair the fuel excise tax would be if electric cars were exempt, as well as explaining how exempting them from the tax actually gives preferential treatment to certain groups in car industries. My first point is that the fundamental purpose of the fuel tax, since its early introduction in the 1900s, is to fund the development and maintenance of Australia's road network, a tax which, until recently, all motorists contributed to. The Australian Bureau of Statistics state that there are more than 19 million vehicles registered in Australia. The fuel excise tax is an efficient way of collecting the tax. It has nothing to do with the type of fuel a car uses. On this basis, electric or hybrid cars should not be exempt from the tax. According to the NRMA, 25% of this tax, or approximately $3 billion a year, is used to repair, maintain and develop our national road infrastructure. Fleet Care Australia state that the tax accounts for 46% of all road funding. The tax was set up as a user-pays tax. In this way, car owners get to benefit. So based on its fundamental purpose, why should owners of electric cars be exempt? They are users of the road, and let's face it, they will expect that our roads are maintained. All motorists should benefit from the fuel excise, and therefore electric vehicles should not be exempt. My second point is that electric cars should not be exempt on the basis that 75% of this tax is used as general revenue by the government for essential services that we use. The Australian Parliament website estimates the tax brings in $10 to $15 billion annually. That means around $9 billion is spent on essential services such as healthcare, education, building infrastructure, and business incentives. Mike Bradley of the Financial Review calls this tax the Treasury's golden child because it is unavoidable for most of Australia's 16 million plus motorists, and it is largely invisible. 80% of people are unaware they pay 40 cents per litre tax to the government. The Productivity Commission has already confirmed that fuel excise tax revenue is falling because of improvements in vehicle efficiency and electric and hybrid cars. It fell in 2% in the 2015-16 financial years. Bloomberg Energy Finances estimate that electric and conventional cars will be the same price by 2025, and by 2050, almost 50% of cars will be electric. Exempting electric cars from the excise will have a staggering impact on federal revenue. The current model of collecting this tax will not hold in the future and will need a new approach. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we believe the principle behind the fuel excise is sound, and electric cars should not be exempt on the basis that all motorists who use the roads should pay for their upkeep as well as continue to contribute to the essential general revenue that this tax generates. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Marla Neagle.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. We, the negative team, absolutely believe that this statement is false. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that electric cars need to pay the fuel excise tax to be able to pay for our roads. We disagree with this because, while we do agree that we need money for projects such as our roads, there are more effective ways than the fuel excise tax. Electric cars run on purely electricity, not fuel, so therefore they cannot pay fuel excise tax, because they do not even buy fuel. Other tax methods, such as taxing them based on distance instead of fuel, will be more effective, as all cars will be able to contribute, including electric cars and not just combustion vehicles. He also said that the fuel tax is an effective way to tax road users, including drivers of electric cars. We disagree with this because it is not an effective tax, as electric cars do not run on fuel, so you cannot properly measure this. Our first speaker has already talked to you about how electric cars do not use fuel, so they therefore cannot pay the fuel excise tax. She also suggested alternative taxing methods. Today, I will be talking to you about how if electric cars are exempted from the fuel excise tax, it will positively affect our economy and how it will lead to a boom in renewable energy. Now to my first point. If we exempt electric cars from the fuel excise tax in Australia, it will help our country to become more independent in the global economy. According to BBC News, Australia is currently dependent on imports for more than 90% of its fuel needs. Crude oil comes from Middle East and is processed at refineries in South Africa and China and Singapore. It is then shipped via aviation to Australia as diesel, fuel and petrol. According to Australian Government Department of Environment and Energy, from 2016 to 2017, Australia spent over $26 billion on petroleum imports from several countries. $26 billion is a ridiculous amount of money that we won't need to pay in the future if we exempt electric cars from the fuel excise tax, because we will not need as much fuel. By exempting electric cars from the fuel excise tax, people will be drawn towards buying these electric cars, which will result in Australia being less reliant on other countries. Because of this, the government will eventually be inclined to get rid of this fuel excise tax altogether. My second point is that electric cars in Australia being exempt from the fuel excise tax will result in a boom for renewable energy. More people switching to electric cars will result in an upsurge of renewable energy, which is better for the environment. People need an incentive to buy these cars, so we should move away from taxing these electric cars and move towards promoting them as best we can. With transport responsible for around 18% of Australians' emissions, the CSIRO Energy Roadmap estimates electric vehicles could reduce CO2 emissions by at least 15 million tonnes by 2030. By exempting electric vehicles of the fuel excise tax, more people will be inclined to switch, resulting in a much-needed increase in renewable energy. Renewable is our future, being the cheaper, more environmentally friendly and sustainable source of energy. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we the negative team absolutely do believe that electric cars in Australia should be exempted from the fuel excise tax. We are moving into an age where we have more sustainable modes of travel, so we need to keep up with the change of times by making electric cars seem more appealing for buyers rather than deterring them from buying them with this tax. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Aloysius.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Timekeeper, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of tonight's debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement is true. Now for my rebuttal. The negative team has tried to tell you that electric cars should be exempt from fuel excise because they do not use petroleum fuel. Yes, they may not use this as fuel. However, the government could still measure their electricity usage and add it to the excise tax. This would make it fairer for everyone else and improve the excise tax. The first negative has also tried to tell you that a rising amount of electric cars will help everyone and that a new tax would also be good. This is incorrect, because an article by the Financial Review states that the Australian Parliament estimates that the tax brings in $10 to $15 billion annually. $3 to $4 billion of this is spent on maintaining and improving our roads. The rest is used for education and healthcare. If we take away from this, we will be destroying our economy and taking away money from vital things. This shows that if more electric cars are added, there will be less money in the excise. And this will mean the economy is worse, and if a new tax is added, it will just make it more difficult for everyone. Now to the second negative. She stated that getting rid of the fuel excise will destroy the economy. She stated that getting rid of the fuel excise will make the economy better. This is incorrect, because getting rid of the fuel excise would take away $13 to $15 billion from our economy. Is this really what we want? This would take away from maintenance from roads, healthcare and education. These are our main priorities now, not the future. We can integrate this in, but right now the fuel excise tax is the best for what we need. She has also tried to tell you that electric cars are better for the environment. This is incorrect, because when we make the energy for an electric car, electricity, we have to burn coal, which creates CO2, which is bad for the environment. And to make the batteries for these cars, we must mine precious metals, and these must be dug up from the ground. And when melted, you can't renew them, so they just get left, which is also bad for the environment. And when the car reaches the end of its lifespan, what are we going to do with all that excess metal? Well, you can't really renew it, can you? This is why electric cars are still bad for the environment and are just as good as our cars now. Now for my summary. In summary, the topic of tonight's debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. We, the affirmative team, strongly agree with this statement. Our first speaker has told you that it is unfair and unjust for electric car users to benefit from roads they don't pay for. His evidence supporting this was an article from carsguide.com. It stated that electric cars usually range from $105,000 to $220,000 a year. At the highest, this makes them unaffordable to the average Australian household that earns $44,000 a year. This, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which means less people can buy them and their users do not have to pay tax, which means they're getting a free ride on our roads. His second point was that if the government picks a winner, it leads to inefficiency in the car industry. An article from the Productivity Commission said that employment in automotive manufacturing has decreased by 40%, 30,000 jobs, from 2006 to 2013. This shows that inefficiency is leading to job loss in our industry. Our second speaker, Kai, has told you that firstly, fuel excise tax is principal good tax. According to the Australian government, since its introduction in the early 1900s, it has funded Australia's road network and contributed $2 to $3 billion a year. His final point stated that it should not be exempt on the basis that it is important for government revenue, which is collected in national interest. Mike Bradley of the Financial Review calls it the Treasury's golden child because it is unavoidable for Australia's 16 million motorists. Due to time, I must conclude my speech.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Mia Knopfler.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that electric cars in Australia should not be exempt from the fuel excise tax. We, the negative team, without a doubt know this statement is false. I'll begin by pointing out some flaws in the affirmative team's arguments. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that the power cars use is irrelevant. This is wrong, as the fuel excise tax is a tax on fuel. You can't charge someone on what they don't use. Therefore, electric cars should be exempt from the fuel excise tax. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that only wealthy people buy electric cars. This is wrong because you can't assume that just because someone is driving a more expensive car that they have more money. Who's to say that a person with an average wage can't buy a more economically and environmentally friendly car? The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that the tax from the fuel excise goes towards fixing our roads. However, an article from newsmail.com.au states that not all of the money from the fuel excise tax is earmarked for road and transport infrastructure. Therefore, this statement is incorrect. The third speaker has tried to tell you that electric cars still produce carbon dioxide emissions. We disagree with this because, even though this is true, look at the comparisons between combustion vehicles and electric cars. According to www.energy.gov, when charged from the grid, an electric car will result in around half the CO2 emissions per kilometre driven than the average Australian passenger car. The facts speak for themselves. If we impose this tax, then less people will buy these cars, which will result in higher CO2 emissions, further adding to the abysmal state of our environment. The third affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that you can't recycle old cars. This may be true, but there is no evidence to back this up, and yet car cycling still exists, so this point can't actually be proven. The third affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that the government could measure electricity levels instead.
This is wrong because the method he's suggesting is not the fuel excise tax. The fuel excise tax measures fuel, not electricity. So by suggesting this alternative idea, it does not support their argument. They are meant to be supporting the fuel excise tax, not saying that there are other methods that are better. Therefore, he is simply contradicting himself. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll remind you of our team arguments. Our first speaker told you that the fuel excise tax doesn't apply to electric cars. They do not use fuel, so how can we make electric cars pay tax on something they don't even use? She also said that there are other methods of collecting tax that would be more effective. She brought up the example of the tax on road travel, which would apply to all cars, not just those that run on fuel. Our second speaker told you that if electric cars were exempt from the fuel excise tax, then people would buy them. Independently sourcing our car's power source will support the Australian economy. We source and refine our crude oils in other countries, yet we can create our own electricity, which fuels electric cars. She also stated that another reason we need this incentive is to convince people to buy these low-emission cars. Renewable energy is a greener option which could greatly reduce carbon emissions that lead to global warming. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we the negative team are certain that Australian electric cars should be exempt from the fuel excise tax. Electric cars are more environmentally friendly and better for our economy, and not having a tax on their power source would be an effective incentive to buy these cars. Thank you.